There we go. So welcome everyone. The plan for today is we'll set off as we always do, give you a bit of information sharing and updates from our side. So since our last deep dive, which I think was back in August, we've had some updates to the TED website. We've got some new toolkits and some new features which we wanted to highlight for you today. But the main focus of today's session is going to be on the data that you can get through TED. So we know that many of your organisations might have been using TED for a number of months now, and you're starting to get the numbers of teams where you can start reading into the data on TED. So today's session, we're going to do a bit of sharing in terms of how we use that at Lancs Teaching Hospitals, open that up to a discussion. So we'd love for you to share how you're currently looking at it. And then following the break, we're then going to do a bit of future thinking, and we'd like your input into what data you would like to see in the future, what would really help you in your roles or help your organisation, help you encourage teams to do it or help your organisation commit to TED. So thinking around what can really add that richness to that data. Because what we want to do in 2024 is enhance the system even more and make it even more useful for yourselves and your teams that use TED. What we'll do then is we'll give you a bit of a forward look into 2024, and we've planned our dates for these sorts of sessions for next year. So we'll give you a sneak peek of what we've got planned for next year. And also be looking to take your feedback as well, because we're happy to flex that and cover anything which you feel is really relevant. So just a quick check-in. So for those of you who this is your first quarterly deep dive, this is our sort of collaborative charter. So as part of our TED collaborative, once you join with TED, you're all part of our TED community. And when we first came together, we co-created our sort of shared ethos. And the ethos for this collaborative is to be present and curious, to participate and share, listen actively and respect, and also to be creative and solution focused. The intention with this collaborative is that we've all got useful inputs, we've all got our different perspectives, we all work in perhaps very different organisations, we've got lots of different types of NHS trusts and different types of NHS organisations. So these sessions are always really useful to get your input and your perspective on how we're using TED, how we might adapt to the way we do it in the future, and how we can help support our teams going forward. Okay, so first off, to our updates. So those of you that have been with TED a while might have noticed our new dashboard filters that are on our TED website. So I'm going to give you a bit of demo of those and show how they can work for you and how they might be useful. We've also tweaked our updated survey email. So you may have noticed any teams sending TED now, there is a new sort of wording on the email, and we've adapted that based on your feedback. And we've also added some new data into the data export. So I'll showcase that, as well as some of our new toolkit resources. So I think back at our last quarterly deep dive, I mentioned that we were working on some resources specifically around zero tolerance conversations. And it's at Lancs Teaching, it's been a big theme that we've had this year, that we've wanted to try and encourage that awareness of how you create that zero tolerance culture and how you identify those perhaps behaviours or things that you want to have zero tolerance around, and how you make that part of your team's culture and in a positive way, and are able to positively challenge things. So I'll share some of those resources for you and give you a signpost to some of our future resources. And we've also got things like I've recently created a video on how to create a follow-up TED to help team leaders, very short, sort of 5-minute video. We're building up a bit of a YouTube catalogue of things that can be useful. And then we have a tip around Google Translate, which my colleague Jude has helped us ensure that it works well, because Jude is fluent in Italian, which is very useful to have in our team. So what I'm going to do, I'll just share my screen at this point and I'll walk you through each of these new features. Okay, can I just check, has that TED website come up for everyone?
Yep.
Yep, marvelous. Okay, so I think it was in about late September, early October, maybe, we've added this new feature into the system. So some of our organisations, and definitely yours at Lancs Teaching, one of the headaches around the main dashboard screen was that it showed everything. And when you've got, say, over 100 TEDs, 100 teams doing it, it can be really difficult to find the one that you might want to look for. Not so much of an issue from a team leader's perspective, as they can only see their own teams, but from a trust admin perspective, when you get lots and lots of teams using it, it can become a bit unwieldy to try and find it. So we've worked with our developers to add in this new feature. A little bit of teething issues when it came in, so do want to apologise if anyone sort of panicked when you first saw this, because it does hide some of the TEDs to make it more manageable. But I do want to promise you everything is still in there in the system. What we've done with these filters is when you first log in as a trust admin, it will show you on your dashboard all the active surveys. Now, what that means is you've got a couple of options on this toggling. If you click on it once, it will show you all your archived surveys. And if you click on it again, it will show you both the archived and active. So not too dissimilar from what it did before. It used to hide the archived surveys down below a button, and I think that button disappeared. There used to be a button at the bottom there of your dashboard screen. So just a useful how-to. If you're ever looking for an archived survey, this is the way you can get to it. But by default, most of the time, you're going to want to be looking at surveys that are active and haven't been archived. So that's what that one does. Our next filter button defaults to, every time you initially log in, you'll get the view of all your follow-up and non-follow-up TEDs. So when you click on this, you can filter those out. So for some of you, this might be further down the line, but as teams start to do more follow-ups, you might just want to look at repeat TED surveys. So if you click on this filter, it will show you, you can see here, I've just got one follow-up logged into my test database, so I can see that. Or if I click on it a second time, it'll just show me non-follow-up. So what that means is these are first TEDs for teams. And again, that might be useful if you're looking to compare, you know, what are generally our follow-ups looking like against original TEDs that are in there. But if I click on it again, by default, again, it will show you both. Next one, it says all surveys. This is really only useful for yourselves as trust admins. But if you, let's say you've been running some TEDs for different teams, if you just want this to show your own surveys, by clicking on that, it will just show my surveys. So when I've logged in here, it's not much different for me because it's our test database and I set most of them up. But it just showing me ones that I've created and that are assigned to me as technically the team leader. So that'll help you filter those out if there are TEDs that you personally are working on. But again, the default is to show all surveys that are in there. Final one is you get current and expired. So again, by default, it will show you everything when you first log in, but you have the option to click on that filter and it will just show you expired TEDs. Now, what we mean by current and expired, a current would be a survey which is currently live, so one where the deadline has not yet passed. An expired survey would be one where the deadline is in the past. So on here, I can currently see any expired surveys, and here I can see current surveys. So these are all surveys where I've set the deadline sometime after today's date. But again, by default, scroll up to the top, it will show you both. So the intention with this is just to make it more manageable for those of you who might have lots of TEDs on there. On the next row, you get the option to show different amounts of TED. So if you, like me, you've got over 10, you may want to change that and you can drop that down to 15, 20, 25 or 30. So if I want to show that 11th one on there, I can put that on there. I can also sort it in different ways. So by created date, And we have had a bit of feedback from those of you who've been some coffee catch-ups. Last month, definitely, we were talking about this, and something we've asked our developers to change is it currently shows your oldest TED first. So we're going to swap that around so it shows your most recent one first by default, just because it's most likely you'll be working on your ones that are currently live or most recent, definitely. So it defaults to show it sorting by created date, but you can sort by deadline date, and that will change the order again a little bit. You can default by survey name if you just want it alphabetical, or by division. So again, this can be useful if you've several different divisions, but odds are if you're looking to sort it by division, you might be more useful to filter it by your drop down in this division filter. So this again will let you just look at a certain number of TEDs for a particular area of the organization. So if this is myself, I might be looking at our corporate services division. I think most of my test ones are in there. Let's say if I go to medicine, there's not so many in there because I don't use that on my test ones, but yeah, again, it's there to help you filter and help you find through them. Now, next thing I wanted to point out with this, which some of you might have noticed while I've been going through those, one of the downsides to us filtering it like this, and we have asked our developers to work on this, is previously this dashboard sort of review at the top showed you the averages across all the surveys in your organization. But because this pulls it from the current page that you're on, you now need to be mindful that this is just showing me the average from the surveys on this page that I'm currently looking at. So if I've got over 15 surveys, this won't give me that full average of all of those surveys, because ones that are on page 2 won't be feeding through to this. So we want you to be mindful of that. Now, to get around this, as Sam's just said in the chat, we are working on this with our developers, but you can work this out for yourselves, and this sort of feeds into our next update that we've had in the system. So the next little thing that we've added recently, on your dashboard page, you might have used the export surveys data, and when you do that, if I just scroll across, bear with me, it's come up in a different order, this one, you'll get a spreadsheet download that looks something similar to this, where you'll get all of the TEDs that are happening in your organization, and you'll be able to then filter them in any way that you wish. So what we have recently added, if I just come along here, scrolling a bit too fast there, is you now get on this report, you get an average on the different questions, so you can get those question averages across the different surveys. This is something which a number of organizations have asked for. We think it will be really useful as well, and what we're going to go into a little bit later on today is how we use this data and how we filter it out. Just want to touch on that little bit in terms of working out the averages. I'm just going to filter out some of these with 0, so there's a few less. So if I wanted to work out the averages of all these that I've got selected, what I can do is highlight that column, and you may not be able to see, it depends on the size of your screen, but what I can see there is there's 17 TEDs that I've selected there, and the average for that team communication is 3.2. So you can work it out that way, but we recognise it is a little bit clunky that way, so we're working on getting it so it will appear on your dashboard. Okay, any questions about that before I move on to our next feature in there?
I just want to ask Lee, on that report, is there any way that we can have deadline date on there? Because I do have to provide an update to our workforce committee on TED, and I have to go through, and because obviously it's completion day is the last time, is that the same as deadline? Or is it the last person that accessed it?
It's the last person who completed a survey, that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really good bit of feedback. Sam, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had this issue, like, when do we report? Because last completion date is constantly changing, and we go back and forth. Oh, well, that one wasn't included last month, but now it does need to be included last month. And then we were looking at, well, actually people can move their deadlines as well. So if you know, we get team leaders going, oh, I need to extend it. So we have determined our reporting is on when it was created, because that was the only kind of truth that doesn't really change. So just a little bit of a thing that we learned there. But I think that's a good easy thing that we can get that one done for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good suggestion, Claire. And really, when we look at this data, anything that is in the system, we can include in here. So yeah, I don't think it would be too hard for our developers to just add an extra column in there, which is deadline date. But yeah, as Sam says, it's something you need to be mindful of in your reporting, because it could move if a team leader extends the deadline.
That happened to me last month, because I think I reported, can't remember if it was a figure, and then when I went back in to do the end of month, I thought that's not the same as before, and I realised there's been a few deadlines moved. So yeah. It's not, to be honest, I'm not happy with that figure that we're reporting on. There's a lot more richness that we could come out of here, but I think they're in the process of looking at the data at the moment of what they want from it. So
marvellous. Fab. Well, what I'd ask you to do, Claire, hold that thought, because that's exactly what we want to discuss later on today. So yeah, any ideas you've got for that or anything that could help, we'll definitely get into that. So thank you for sort of segueing nicely into that. Thank you. Okay, so next one on the list is the updated survey email. So just bear with me. So another thing which we've had some feedback from you and from our own team leaders as well is that we wanted to tweak the email that team members get when they come in to do a TED. So you remember, I think originally when we launched this, there was just a couple of paragraphs of text and then the link to complete the survey. So we've tried to add a little bit more richness to this. And really sort of set out, first of all, what it's for. So from a team member's perspective, particularly if this is the first time you're doing a TED, that you understand that TED is around understanding the team's culture. It's about giving feedback to your team and reflecting on how the team's working, and then set out some of the next steps as well. So it sort of sets out that the results will be shared as part of a feedback session where we can plan our next steps. We also wanted to reinforce that anonymity message, because that's one of the most common challenges which our team leaders face, is that they'll put the survey out. I'm sure you get it with Staff Survey every year as well, but I think it's sometimes human nature to be a little bit skeptical about something if it's the first time you're doing it, and thinking, oh, how is this data going to be used? Where will my answers be seen? So we've tried to sort of flash that out and emphasize that the survey is anonymous and they'll feed into that report. Again, emphasize that the survey is quite short. It doesn't take a long time to fill in, so it's not really onerous from a team member's perspective. And then also just give an indicator of what are the types of questions that are in there to really try and encourage that uptake from team members. Other new things that we've added in there, it highlights the deadline date, just a small sort of cosmetic tweak in there, but just makes it really clear to team members when they need to fill this in by. They get their own unique survey link in there. And then the brand new bit is before it wasn't pulling the team leader name through. So it now, I've set up this TED, so it's pulling through that's who set it up. It has your trust name, so it will show your team leader's name who set that up. Sam, would you like to add to that? Oh, you're on mute.
Really me. I'm also confident that we changed it so the deadline, we had a little bit of an issue where it was the midnight before or the day before, wasn't it? So we've changed that too. So I think that was a common little small thing that was there. And I think it was colleagues from Liverpool, I think, who kind of also shared this idea. I think it was Laura initially who contacted us. So thank you, Laura. And hopefully this has met that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just to make it clear now, if I set the deadline as 23rd of November today, team members will now have until 11:59 tonight to fill that in. So it's a bit more clear for team members doing that. Okay, so next little update is around our zero tolerance resources. So I think, I'll just put these in order. last time we had a quarterly deep dive, we were working on this, and it's really around those culture conversations within a team. So we've created 2 resources around this, which some of our teams at LTH have already started using. And I know our Culture Lead, K2, some of you may remember from a couple of quarterly deep dives back. She's had a heavy input in this, in helping us design and develop this. But really, we've got 2 resources. The first is a PowerPoint template for a team to be able to have a conversation around what zero tolerance is, and how it might apply in their particular environment. And then some questions to help them think around, what does it mean to us? What is our desired culture? What sort of behaviours lend themselves to that culture we want? What sorts of things perhaps undermine it? And do we want to have zero tolerance around? And sometimes this may even come into, what sorts of zero tolerance do we need to have with external stakeholders, and sometimes even patients as well. So it can really open up that important conversation around what is our approach to what are sometimes quite tricky situations. So we've put in some questions that team leaders could ask, and how to sort of manage some bits in the notes around how to manage that type of conversation with your team. But if I just come on to the next resource, to support that, we've got a guide with some top tips for team leaders on how to navigate that type of conversation. So there's things in there like making sure you create that safe environment where it's okay to sort of challenge ideas and think of different sides of that conversation. Also, if you just come on to the next page, thinking around it as a continuous improvement approach, as everything is with TED, that there'll be times when perhaps we don't get it right and we need to learn from that. So how do we create that learning culture? So just wanted to signpost those things to you. And if I just come back very quickly to the TED website to find those, the easiest way to do this is just come to TED Toolkit up at the top, type in 0, and you'll find those 2 resources that are in there. But we are adding new resources all the time. So as we say every time, if there's anything you'd like to see in here, or anything your teams would like to see in the toolkit, let us know. And something we're going to be working on in the new year with our developers is revamping some of the theme pages and adding some more sort of rich resources in there. So things like perhaps videos and different elements to those sites. So with that in mind, that leads me nicely on to one we're currently working on, and just really to put this on your radar. It's not ready yet, but something I've been working on, and a couple of other members of our team have been working on, is something around the I always get tongue-tied with these NHS acronyms, but the SIRF. Some of you may be aware of this, but this is something, particularly in clinical areas, the Patient Safety Incident Response Framework is something which is coming in for all NHS organisations. I think some of your trusts may have had this for quite a while, and others may be transitioning to this around now, because I think the NHS sort of guidance is to move into this in autumn 2023. So we're definitely there now. So what we're looking to create in TED is some resources to help teams think around how do they respond to patient safety incidents, and how do they reflect and learn from events that might happen, or learn together as to how they can best tackle some of these issues. So what I would say in the meantime, if you search for it, just Google it and you can come to the NHSE's guidance. There are some really useful videos in there, which again, we may embed into the TED website as good references, but we're going to create something specifically for teams to be able to implement this. So one to watch out for, and we'll share that as soon as that's ready. Okay, next one we've got just a very quick check on. Next one is we do have a new video. As I mentioned, we got a video for creating a follow-up survey. So one of the bits of feedback we've had is teams are often, when they come to do the second one, they're creating a brand new survey. So we wanted to provide as much guidance to help teams do that, because although it might not look too much different from a team perspective, if you don't do the follow-up in the way the system likes you to do it, you won't get that richness of seeing your TED details side by side and being able to compare how you're doing currently to how you did when you previously did TED. And also, the more we can encourage teams to do those follow-up TEDs, the more rich it makes your data at an organization level, because you'll then hopefully be able to see how the more regularly teams are doing TED, the more that bar is ticking up and how they're growing in different areas of TED. So I'll not play that video now, but we will share a link following today's session for that in our YouTube feed. And then the last one, and I haven't pre-prepped this, so just bear with me. I will bring up a new Google Translate. So we've been asked a few times actually for if the TED survey is available in other languages. Now, we've asked this to our developers, and we've been made aware of a very useful feature in Google Translate. So when you come to Google Translate, you can just put in some text into there and it will translate it to whatever language, but you can translate a whole website. And this has been really useful because you can use it with your staff survey as well. So we've been recommending this to quite a lot of people. So if I select on here, so I'm translating from English to where are we, Jude? Italian. Let's put that in, and our experts can tell us if this is right or not. And then I'm going to quickly, just bear with me, come back to my other web page with TED on. Oh, hang on, actually, I'll go to my email and click on my link with the survey. There we go. So I've got the survey there. So I'm a team member now who's clicked on my link. So what they can do is highlight the URL. So if I copy that and paste it back into our Google Translate and we search there. There we go. Now, I don't know if that's right, but Jude, can you confirm to me that
Come tali dagli altri, il nostro team. Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Fabulous.
Really good.
So that adds an awful lot of usability. So if you do have colleagues who maybe English isn't their first language, or it would help them to fill it in, this is a really useful tool which doesn't require anything else from our side. But I wanted to demo that because it's not just useful for TED. You can use it for things like the staff survey or any useful websites that you wanted to share with colleagues who maybe would benefit from having it in a different language. And just to show you, these are all the different languages that are in Google Translate. So there's absolutely loads in there that you can use with that. Jude, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to say that I was so impressed with the translation, because I looked at the staff survey and I did the first 5 pages out of 8 meticulously, and I was very impressed with how they translated it. I think just that Italian can be very formal when it's written, and there was one translation that just made me laugh, because in English it was very formal, saying, you know, I look forward to going to work. And the Italian translation was, I'm dead excited to go to work. And it was, you know, but I was really, really impressed with how it was translated. Very impressed.
Yeah, and that's more of it. Yeah, so perhaps a point to remember, it's not perfect, but
No.
it is very, very good in terms of that. And it definitely helps with things like this. And I'm sure there's lots of cases where you might need to translate it. Sam, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just to pick up on the staff survey thing, if you go to Google Translate tab on your screen there for a second, yeah, and then if you go to documents, so all we did was download the questionnaire from the main staff survey website, drag and dropped it into here, and then within seconds it just looks like this. So this is the one that we tested with Italian. And then you can just download this, and we sent this over to our estates colleagues so they could print it off and at least that would enable someone. So I think we asked them for what languages they wanted, and it took moments, and so they've printed it off to share as people are coming along to doing their staff survey. So I don't know if anybody else that's helpful for, but just wanted to share.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I think that just illustrates a number of ways that you can use this, and something I'd heard of Google Translate before, but I didn't realize this sort of functionality existed, and it's so quick to be able to do that for you. So useful to have in your back pocket as an OD practitioner when you get those sorts of questions. Amy, would you like to go in there?
Can I ask, because I feel like it would be a missed opportunity if I didn't ask, and I don't want to hijack this meeting. Have you noticed better response rates with staff survey from doing that, Sam?
I can't say in a state because it was very late in the day that they came to us with this problem. It was literally last week. So we very quickly mobilised. I will have a good look. Maybe later on. It's just unfortunate that we didn't do it until week 7. So I think the lesson is for us do that earlier, and then perhaps also get some feedback from them. But thank you for asking.
No, well, you don't know what you don't know, do you? So I was just intrigued. I thought if I don't ask, I'll have missed the opportunity to see the impact
I'll have
of
a
it.
quick sneaky look at the estates update late during the break for you, and if I see anything that I think would be useful.
Great, thank you.
That's fab. Thanks, Amy. Justine, would you like to go in?
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, that's a great feature, isn't it, on Google Translate? Never seen that. That's brilliant. My question is about when people are filling in either the TED survey, possibly the NHS survey, if there's a text box where they have to make a comment, do they write that in their own language and that gets translated back, or do they have to write it in English? And I'm just wondering, how do you deal with those kind of text boxes?
That's a very good question. I would my hazard a guess, I don't think it will translate it back. They could, if they put it into Google Translate it before copying it in, but I don't think the system would automatically translate it. I think that being said, though, I suppose when you get your comments back, if there are odd comments that are in a different language, you could then use Google Translate to do that yourself. Jude, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I can't remember if they did need to put a comment in. And I'm just thinking back to when I lived in Italy, and I lived in a village where nobody spoke English. So I really understand from first hand the help that this would give me as a non-native speaker of English. And I think usually somebody's oral English, spoken English, is maybe better than their reading and writing skills. The active skills are better. And I'm sure if there was a comment just to help people, that person could actually, express how they felt, and somebody else could maybe fill it in. I know you want it to be confidential though, don't you? But I'm just thinking, yeah.
I think there is the feature on the website where you can verbally do it. I know on the phone app you can definitely do that, where you can speak in one language and it will translate it for you. So again, a little bit clunky because they then need to copy and paste it in, but that could be one workaround. Sam?
Just reflecting back on what I could see in our free text last year, so we used Picker. There was no responses in the free text comments in a different language. However, perhaps the invitation wasn't there, and that's why we never got them. So I think moving forward, I know that I'm gonna lobby, the right word, mention it to Picker. They do a lead session, I think, in the Northwest, so I'll be going to that, and I will be mentioning, how can we talk about inclusion if we're not even giving that option. So I really will be pushing for Picker to provide some different opportunities next year. And I think if we need to spread that invitation, particularly next year, to say, if you want to put a free text comment in your own language, we'll do our best to translate it at our side. So, I think we just have to extend the invitation, really.
But thanks for your question, Justine. Really good point. Fab. So I'm just going to come back to my slides now. Just bear with me. So yeah, so they're just some of the new features that we've been working on, and some hints and tips on how you can use it. But again, as I say, let us know what new things you'd like to see, and that's going to be a part of the second half of today's discussion, where we're talking more about that data reporting and thinking around what could really add value to that for you and the other stakeholders around your organisation, including your team leaders, your senior leaders, perhaps divisional leads. Think around what might be useful for them. Okay, so our next topic is just a bit of a showcase really from something we've been doing at Lancs Teaching. So back in the summer now, we started this in August, but something that we've set up is a new LTH TED team leader community. And it is something which we've had in different guises since over the last sort of 6 or 7 years that we've had TED, where we've encouraged team leaders to support each other, try to build up those advocates of TED, and definitely get our sort of innovators involved, definitely when we were initially pushing it out. But what we've done this summer is we've sort of formally recognised this as an LTH team leader community. And our goals with this really are to encourage our team leaders to ask questions, to share their successes, also to share the things that don't go so well, and then they can help each other out, and they can help inform us about what support might help them in the future. So the way this has taken shape is over the last few months, we've set up some different community events for our team leaders. We've created an MS Teams space where every time we train someone on how to use TED and they complete their TED team leader training, we add them to that MS Teams group. And what we've been able to do with that is regularly put things into that group which might interest our team leaders. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we've done with that today. So these are things like Toolkit Tuesdays and also a TEDcast, which is a bit of a podcast video cast that we've recorded. So the first thing on this is our community events. So when we set this up, initially we ran some events at our different sites that we've had, and we invited all of our backlist of people who are trained in using TED, people who might have used TED before. And what we wanted to do is really share our idea around what the community could be, and introduce them to some of the things that we could share with them, but also be able to ask them on what they would like to make their community. We want this community to be something which our team leaders own, and we contribute to help that. So we had some great feedback from those events, things like providing team leaders with an anonymous way of sharing a challenge. So that's something which we're going to do in maybe a Jamboard format or something like that. We did even talk about the idea of having like an agony aunt, or dear Lee, or dear Ted. My team has gone through such and such, how can I possibly help them? So that sort of thing, and that's our intention. If we can keep sharing those sorts of things, we can help raise awareness of how TED can work in different types of teams, different types of situations, but we can also signpost them to some of the useful resources that are in TED. So next thing, as I said, we've set up an MS Teams space, and you might be able to see a little bit on some of those screenshots that I've taken. What we do in there, we share weekly. We try to put at least a couple of things on a week around TED, and the intention with this is really just to keep teamwork and TED front and center of people's minds, keep them thinking around what useful resources are in the TED platform that they may want to use. But we also use this as a great space to be able to give shout outs and recognition. So we do things like shout outs to our newly trained team leaders with TED. We signpost to things like useful podcasts that we might have seen around team engagement. And we encourage our team leaders to ask questions through that as well, so that it's not necessarily just us answering those questions. It might be other team leaders as well, sharing what they did in different situations as well. And where that helps us is we get a feel for what are the typical types of challenges that team leaders are seeing, where might we want to create new new toolkit resources or target our support. So it's really useful in that respect. Next one, I'm going to hand over to Jude now, because this is Jude's area to work on.
Oh, thank you, Lee. Yes, so going back when we started the community, TED leader community, we went to our first coffee catch-up session, and something that I think the TED team leaders really enjoyed about it was the question and answer session that we did. Because I remember as a primary teacher, when I used to go on courses, yeah, we liked the courses, but it was so good when you were just given 10 minutes to talk about this, and then we'd kind of discuss a network, like have Ofsted come, or what are you doing about this? And I think our TED team leaders really enjoyed being able to share their thoughts and their opinions about how TED was going. And sorry, one team leader came up with the suggestion that, as she really thought that the TED toolkit was amazing, there are lots of resources on it. However, she just didn't have the time to be able to peruse it and get the best out of it. So we went back to the drawing board, and we thought about showcasing one resource a week on our TED Team Leader Community Hub. So what I thought was, the thing that I took to heart that the TED team leader said was the fact that she didn't have a lot of time. So I reflected on, what kind of format could I design it in so that a TED team leader can just have a look at the resource and in about 2.5 seconds think, yeah, this is the one for me. So I reflected on, I've got to talk about this. I love cooking. And you know how you cook every week, don't you? And then suddenly you think, I'm always doing the same things. I want to do something different. So I reflected on, when I look at recipes, what attracts me to a site. And I thought, I love the BBC Good Food Guide, because I look at the recipe and within about 2 seconds, I know if I want to do that recipe, because it'll tell me the duration. So how long it'll take me, because if it's like 2.5 hours on a Saturday night, it's like, no, can't be doing with that. Or it might tell me the level of difficulty and also the ingredients, because sometimes, don't you, you could be reading a recipe for about 5 minutes and then think, hang on a minute, I've got to buy, 32 ingredients that I'll never use again. So I thought about doing the TED Toolkit Tuesday in a kind of recipe format, so that TED team leaders can have a quick look at it and a few seconds think about things like the complexity. So most of them are okay for new TED team leaders. Maybe a few of them, somebody who's a bit more experienced, so maybe intermediate or advanced. How long will it take me to do it with my team? And then also, I think a really good feature on the Toolkit Tuesdays is the areas that it covers in TED, because as you'll have seen when you go on the TED Toolkit, some of the resources lend themselves to more than one area, for example, like the SWOT analysis. So I thought it'd be a good idea as well that a TED team leader can quickly see which areas it covers. And so one week it might be on leadership and it might only be linked to 1 or 2. However, some of the resources are linked to 4 or 5 areas as well. So a team leader can think, oh, great, that covers all these 4 or 5 that my team really need to work upon. And then I also, every week, maybe try and link it to something else that might be a theme in our trust. So, for example, I did a review and celebrate resource, which coincided with the launch of We Are Proud, which is a new recognition initiative that we've got in our trust as well. So there we go.
That's marvelous. Thanks, Jude. And we've been getting some great engagement with these Toolkit Tuesdays, and it's just a great way to sort of drip feed some of the great things that we've got within TED and really highlight some of the toolkits which sometimes perhaps fall a bit under the radar. And we've had some great feedback from team leaders who've said to us, oh, we didn't realise there was a resource for this, I'll definitely use that, or they've been liking it and saying that this is one of my favourite ones that I've used with my team. So a really great feature, and Jude's done some great work with that. What I'd say with that, we can share some of the ones that we've already done. So Jude's already created a great catalogue of these, but this is something we're gradually working through. So what we can also do is share the template for these. So if you did want to create your own to share with your own team leaders around specific resources, by all means do that, but please do share with us all, because it helps us all. And I think that ability to at a glance see, okay, how long is this activity going to take, what sorts of things am I going to cover in this, really helps guide team leaders to the right points. Jude, would you like to come back in? Is there something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah, it'd be lovely to share as well, because there were some moments when getting the TED circles and everything in really precisely does test your graphic design skills. But it'd be fantastic to share them with everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll get those templates out to you, and then you've got all the sort of icons and things you might want to use. But that's great. Thanks, Jude. And then the last thing, which we've only recently trialed, sort of our first one, is what we've called TEDcast. And you can see there we've got myself, Sam, and Heather, who's our staff survey lead. And what we've done with this is we've recorded a short video that covers a specific topic. So this one, as you can imagine, at this time of year, staff survey is one of our big focuses. So right at the start of the staff survey, Sam, Heather and myself recorded a Teams meeting. So just similar to this, no sort of high-tech equipment or anything. We recorded a team meeting where we discussed some of the key points that team leaders might want to think about as they go into staff survey season. So we talked about things like, how can you encourage uptake in your team? What are frequently asked challenges that you get to it, and how might you answer those challenges around anonymity, or around how is the data getting used? How are we going to use it in our team? So a really great opportunity to talk around some of those key themes. So again, it's perhaps LTH specific, so perhaps something that you can't use yourself, but you could definitely create your own version of that. And our intention in the future is to create more. I'd love to have conversations around how team leaders might approach things like EDI conversations, or around culture conversations. So my intention with that is, as we go into 2024, create more short videos, create a series of videos around key topics that might be relevant to different teams. Okay, so that's our team leader community. Are there any questions around that? Any thoughts or anything you'd like to ask about how we set it up? No, that's okay. No, that's fine. Okie dokie. So how are we doing for time? 12 o'clock. So what I'd like to do now, we're going to kick off our sort of main bulk of a topic. We will have a break shortly, but I wanted to sort of kick off our conversation on utilising TED data. From a trust admin perspective, I've just shown you on the screen, you get a certain amount of data through TED. So when you log into that data dashboard screen and you go into the report section on your TED, you'll get a screen that looks similar to this. So what this one says is it gives us a breakdown of where each of your different divisions are, so you can see year on year what has been the progress with them and how they're comparing to previous years. So it's useful to a point, but we recognize that the real richness of this data comes when you start to export that surveys report. You get it into Excel and you start to use it in different ways. So something which some of our recent coffee catch-up events we've been talking around is, how are you using that data? And we'd just like to open that conversation to everyone who's on the call today. But I'd like to kick us off by just showing you one of the ways that I share the data with our divisions monthly at LTH. So what I try to do every month, with our TED spreadsheet data is to try and represent that in a slightly different way every month to really keep it interesting, keep it meaningful to our divisions, and really try and tell them things from TED that might be useful to them. So this example shows how back in May, what I did is this sort of screen. I'll get my pointer out, but what we've got in there, I highlighted for each area what their strongest performing TED theme was. I was also able to pull out what was their weakest performing area and an area that they might want to focus on as a division. And then you've also got that graph which compares those averages across all of the different TED themes. What we also use this space for is to highlight when are our upcoming training sessions. So for team leaders who might be interested but haven't yet got involved, when they can undertake that training, but also when they can book on. And we also give that bit of recognition as well. So we give a bit of a shout out to which teams have been doing TED. So this is a really great way of being able to showcase and recognise the teams that are doing TED, but not exposing any team to sharing their results any higher up in the organisation. So it's still that safe way to do it, but give that recognition to teams that are engaging with it. I'll give you one more example of that. So this is a different one that I did in August. So in August, I presented it in this way. Again, what I can do is share some of these slides with you, then you've got them as a template. But what I encourage you to do, use your own flair on this, think of what things are useful to you. But the way I did this in August was we target our divisions to try and get so much more uptake than what they did in the previous year. So what we can see here is corporate service division, how many they've currently got, what they need to hit their target. Give them an indication of how many team leaders have been trained. So this is how many registered team leaders they have on the TED system. So we can pull that out from the data as well. And again, we've got those sort of signposts to when they can next book on training, and a shout out to the teams that are doing TED. So just different ways that you might want to use that data. So what we wanted to sort of throw out as a question is, how are you using that TED data in your organisation? Are there any other ways that you're using it at present which is useful to you? Are you doing anything like that maybe? So would anyone like to share? All gone a bit silent there. So and any thoughts on how you might want to use that data maybe, or plans for the future, as Sam says? So I suppose I know some of you might be really early on in your TED journey, so that data might not yet be at that that stage where it's meaningful for you. Claire, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I wasn't in the conversation about how to record TED. They took it that they wanted just how many surveys were completed in the month. But I definitely think there's more meaningful data available, and I've suggested like the engagement scores and number of team leaders trained and the conversion as well, because I think in our, we've been using it for almost, well, 24 months. It's only 24 months, isn't it? And we found that, you know, we've got a lot of people on the system that haven't actually done it, and I've gone reaching out to them because we've not made it mandatory, but we've done some sort of coercing into using it. But it's just interesting for when they're reporting to see that there's activity out there training, but it's that bit about them, even though they've been trained, is actually using it. I mean, some of our teams, I mean, for example, our cardiology team only trained in last August and then only put a TED together in May. So it took them a bit of time to like warm up to the idea. So I think for us, definitely, there's so much data in there. We could have some more meaningful stuff. So we are definitely looking at other ways, not just completed surveys. So that doesn't really tell me the true picture.
Yeah, I think that those are really good points, Claire. And I think when you're starting out with this, I think initially those TED numbers are the useful thing. But definitely, as you say, once you've been on 18 months, 24 months, you start to get more richness from what are the themes telling you, what are the trends that we're seeing. And also throughout that time, you'll likely have a number of teams who've maybe done TED more than once.
I was going to say the repeat surveys would be really useful, because then that shows true engagement, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you can really show the benefits of TED, because definitely the hope would be when they come to do the second, third, fourth TED, you'll start to see those trends where some of those themes are going up. And, you know, maybe you'll get one or two go down, but you'll see generally, what we've seen at Lancs Teaching is generally the teams that are doing this regularly, they get better and better results over time, and they're starting to see those benefits. So yeah, absolutely. That's where you can get that richness.
Can I just ask a question about repeat surveys, actually? So when they're done, they've got 2 results. As they build up into the third and fourth, does it then still print? Does it create a report with those 3 lots of results on?
So it doesn't on the actual TED report that the team will see, but it will do on your trust export. So what you could do is filter down to just filter that team out, or that team leader, and then you could look at over time what has been the changes in that team. So yeah, you could filter that out.
Thank you.
And what I would say, again, that's somewhere where we're looking to see how can we make it useful, and if there is that appetite to show that trend over time. And I think something, Sam, we did talk with our developers about last time around, maybe on the repeat TED survey, having an additional page or a separate download where you can start to see things like trends over time and things like that. But again, we'll segue into that a little bit later of how you might use data in different ways and new enhancements we can make to the system. Okay. Any other thoughts on how anyone's using the data? I think there's a couple of things come in the comments. Yeah, Lisa, that's absolutely fine. If you're not using the data at the minute, that's absolutely okay. And what we want to do is sort of showcase how you might want to use it, and also learn ourselves as well. Are there any different ways? I think with the slides that I've just shown you, what my intention is to try and show the data in as many different ways as I can to our different stakeholders in the trust, and then get that feedback from them. Let them, you know, dictate, you know, what would they like to see, and really encourage them to take ownership of that data. Is our sort of ultimate goal, really. If we can get senior divisional leads to say, oh yeah, we want to increase our numbers by X amount, or we really want to see our review and celebrate success move upwards in the next 6 to 12 months, then that's what we really want, that those senior leads and the teams themselves start to take ownership of that data. So whatever we can provide them that helps them do that, then the more the better, really. So just coming back to how our dashboards currently look. So when you go up to the reporting section on the left hand side of your TED, you see this screen, and what it currently gives you is these graphs by division to get those uptake numbers and a searchable list of the teams that have been doing TED. But this was something which we designed way back when we first thought of this sort of website. So we're realizing more and more now that there's a lot more that we can give, similar to those slides that I've just been showing you. There's a lot more data in the TED system which would be really useful to have sort of on demand as you click onto that. So what we'd like to move on to now is how can this be improved? So I think, Sam, you wanted to share some of the ways that you've been using the data at some of your client check-in meetings.
That's right. Thank you for that quick intro there. So when the system was originally set up, obviously we were looking at, well, we want to count how many team leaders have been created, and we also want to count and keep a track on how many TEDs have been set up. But actually over time we've started to understand, oh, there's more, a bit like what Claire was saying earlier, there's richer data that we want to get out there. And I suppose my aim is to have this data right there when you click on that reporting button, so that you can at a glance not only see what you need to see, but also see progress over time. Particularly a lot of our clients are currently looking at the business case for future, or, you know, looking at how they can sort of demonstrate, particularly in the pilot clients, the impact that they've had over the first 12, 24 months. So one of the things that I was looking at with our university client was actually, how do we show their progress over time? So one of the things that I was chatting to our system developer was, you know, how can we not only just show how many team leaders are on the system, but actually how many at different points in the quarters, how can we show growth throughout the year in terms of building up the amount of people who've trained in team leaders. So I thought that might be something that clients might want to see. Obviously number of TEDs, but also sort of seeing it again in those chunks. So how many are you doing in quarters? This could also support you in the future to go, do you know what, we're always a bit lower at this quarter. Is it something that I need to change how I communicate? Is it something that I can be doing in terms of supporting more action at this different times of year? At the moment, you don't see at a glance participation. I spend quite a lot of time downloading client data and doing little Excel and updates. So I was thinking participation might be useful for our clients to be able to see. Obviously, I can't report on number of training sessions. That's something that, you might want to pick up on. Talking about follow-up TEDs, again, at the moment, it might be 0 or not applicable if you're brand new, but in the future, you might want to see how many follow-up TEDs are increasing. Maybe this element of participation response rates, looking at maybe your headline data, is there changes throughout the year? And then maybe just, we talked earlier about how that top line keeps moving. So I think something that's more stagnant, that doesn't move based on the list of teams that are on the system. And then I was also thinking about sort of, is it useful for people to understand the highest scoring questions and the lowest scoring questions at any point in time? So those are the main headline data that I thought we could do with having on the reporting page. So something for you to think about. And then the other thing that we started to talk about was team impact, and having a section on where you could literally select a team that have done a follow-up, and that it would come up with some, graphically representative of where things have changed for that team, either up or down. And the reason this idea came about was working with our pilot trusts and looking at some of they've been creating, the TED team stories, where you look at a particular team, you look at where they were and where they went after on their second TED. And quite easily you can pull out the export data in the spreadsheet, and Excel will whip you up some images, which is great. So you can show where they were in July, where they were in December. But I was thinking, actually, if TED did this for you, you could then just screenshot it and add it to yours. That would be good. I think we did that in different ways, as their average score changed. And you can see this in the report, but I just think there's probably a space for something slightly different, so that you can quickly, if you needed to go to a division and say, look, this is where TED is making an impact, or here's some stories of how TED is showing changes at a team level. So this was one of the Somerset ones, where they were looking at particular questions that had made a difference between the first TED and the second TED. And again here, so those were my first thoughts. And what could we do if we were to spend some money and invest in our reporting? So my invitation is, I suppose, magic if we could do, I can't say we can do everything, but really use your imagination, really think beyond maybe where you are now. What might you want in 12 months time, or further down your journey? And those were just some initial thoughts from me.
That's great, thanks, Sam. So that leads us into our activity. What we're going to do is we are going to share a couple of links to a couple of different breakout rooms, just because our normal function, which takes you through to it, isn't working for us at the moment. But what we'd like you to do in each of your breakout rooms is discuss the opportunities for using TED data, and create a wish list of what you would like to see in there. And as Sam says, we can't guarantee that we can do everything, but have a think around what data is in the system. And pretty much when we talk to our developers, they always say, if it's in the system, we can display it in whatever way you want. So if we can get an idea of what would be useful for you, that will help us in our future conversations with them to help enhance that dashboard reporting, and then help you create things like Sam's just shown you, like the slides I showed you, that the system might do some of that for you, to lighten some of that load in terms of crunching that data. So Sam's just popped some links into the chat. Sam and I will join each of the rooms just so we can bring you back when the time comes. So if we come back around 1:45, but if you could just have a read of the chat and click on the room assigned to your name. And what we'll do, we'll share a link to a Jamboard in each of the groups, which you can use. I'll put that in the chat in here as well if you want to click on that. But we'll share that in each of the groups so that you can start using them. So if you click into those now, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so we didn't record the discussions in our breakout room, but I wanted to jump in at this point just to summarise some of the really great ideas that our collaborative came up with. So I'm just going to pop on screen the Jamboards, which will be shared with those of you who've got access to this video, or you can contact us at tedsupport@lthtr.nhs.uk and we can send these slides to you along with the slides from today's session. But some of the points that people came up with today in room 1, they were talking around feedback on the timelines in which people are using TED so that they can get an indication into how regularly people are using TED. And also, once someone's been set up on the TED system, how long is it then until they go on and create a TED? And that would be really useful for us as OD practitioners, because we'll get an indicator of who's perhaps stalling with their TED process, who can we offer that extra support, or can we go to further understand any barriers that there might be to TED. So that will be a great addition to the system. Another point in there was around recording themes at different timestamps. So in Sam's example that she just showed, she looked at quarterly timestamps. So if we could get that view of progression at both a trust-wide level, but also at a team level as well, so that we can get that further rich feedback on the benefits that TED has as teams revisit it time after time after they do their second, third, fourth TED, how you can see that progression over time. So some great ideas around that from room 1. In room 2, we had a discussion around some feedback on the resources and toolkits. So maybe get an indicator of which are your most popular toolkits, which ones are people liking. We talked about maybe the feature to be able to like resources so that we can see how many resources are actually used rather than just downloaded, and which ones do team leaders actually like to use. And again, this could be useful for us as OD practitioners. We can see how different resources might be more popular than others, and that can help us create feature toolkits, because we can focus in on the areas that there's that most appetite for from our team leaders. Another thing which we discussed was around identifying the users that are using TED. So we talked about things like tracking the dates when user accounts were set up, being able to see how they're engaging with TED, when they're engaging with TED. Also see things like deadlines on reports as well, so that on our trust-wide download we can see which TEDs might still be active, which ones might have ended recently, or which ones might be historical data which we might want to discount from certain reports that we're producing. So some really great ideas there, and things we'll be hoping to implement as we go into 2024. We can't promise them all, but we've definitely got some good food for thought there on what we'd like to see. So the next stage is to look in on what's possible. So thank you for staying with us throughout today's video. And if you didn't get to join our quarterly deep dive, we'd love to see you at future events. We really value our community and our collaborative around TED, and you're helping us shape the future of how TED works for teams across the NHS. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next time.